at the KS Pilots, we define experience design as a method for framing experiences in a way that change the way people feel, think, and act. And we have a methodology that builds on this sort of the feeling, the thinking, and the acting as sort of three stages in the design process. And really at the core of how we approach experience design is that relationships are built from shared experiences. And more meaningful shared experiences will therefore deepen a relationship. And it may sound sort of banal, but it really does make it possible from an experience design perspective to really say, okay, what is the nature of the experiences that are being shared by this group of people, this organization, this department? And if you want them to have a new sort of, if you want to build trust, or you want to build a sense of ownership, or a sense of whatever it may be, responsibility, creative courage, then you can really, customize those experiences that are shared, those moments of where everyone comes together. Yeah. And yeah, just again, that the ambition of the methodology that we've developed is to design experiences that enable people in relationships to grow. So it's really, we work a lot with that, like relationship building, but also with that sort of learning experiences. Very interested in adult developmental psychology and what types of experiences actually enable us to look at the world in a new way, to really see and make meaning in a new way. Yeah. And one of the main models that we use to do that is the 5E model, where you have it's just a linear model of designing an experience through time. The excitement, the entry, the excitement, the way someone becomes aware of the experience. The entry is the moment that they enter into the experience. For example, walking into the door of a restaurant. The engagement would be eating the main course at the restaurant. It's sort of the main activity that you came for. The exit would be walking out of the door of the restaurant, just really sort of entering the city again, leaving the designed experience. And the extension would be a physical or digital object that you would take with you to extend the experience. It could be a little fortune cookie if you went to a Chinese buffet or whatever. It can be just it could also be photos. It was an experience. So yeah, so this was just a little brief introduction to experience design from our perspective. But I really am excited to chat with Mikkel. It was such a rich conversation that I came into. So yeah, how are you, Mikkel?
I'm very well. Wonderful to see you.
Say what?
It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah, wonderful to see you as well. Yeah.
I'm
Hopefully you're a little bit more awake than me.
yeah. I'm interested, just to get the ball rolling just for kicks, because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I mentioned just as we first came on a conversation I had with someone this morning, someone that I value very dearly, who's a mentor to me, and she comes from 50 years of living with different indigenous cultures right around the world and talks a lot about consciousness and experience, etc., etc. And she made a distinction for me this morning around there's experience, and then there's our emotional response to that experience. And as you just said, what Chaos Pilot does, or what many of us do, is we design for emotion, these emotional experiences, so to speak. And so just like exploring that dynamic, there's experience, which is an experience. And then right after that, there's that emotional response that we have. And maybe a lot of the work that we do might be, we want to give people a feeling, an emotional experience to do with a product or a service or a team dynamic or a leader or a whatever. But even before that, an actual experience, sometimes, well, all the time, we can't necessarily control that or design for that in a way. It's even more mystical and do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally do. Yeah, I think, for me, part of the reason that I have become interested in experience design is because I believe that there is a misunderstanding, a large misunderstanding, or prevalent misunderstanding sort of the nature of the human experience and sort of the misalignment between how experience really works and how we think it works creates a lot of the world's problems, I think. And I mean, that comes also, that's very, comes also from sort of a Buddhist perspective. I also studied Buddhism, that that's like this fundamental thing that like a lot of our work as people is to create that sort of coherence between reality and how we are perceiving reality, which isn't an easy thing to do. And yeah, so I would definitely say that there's like a moment where emotion is created. There's like, and that's something that you would try to do if you practice meditation, is you try to sort of expand those moments where before this emotional trigger, emotional reaction is, kicks in when you have an experience. But yeah, I mean, I would be super interested to hear, I mean, from your perspective, what, if you call yourself an experienced designer, right? Like, what does that mean to design experience? What is it we're talking about designing?
And it feels to me off the top of my head is that
Yeah.
where there's learning through experience to become better at opening yourself to experience is one thing, maybe perhaps that
Yeah.
Buddhism vibe, and to design experiences that give people an experience that then they're learning to better experience the world rather than process it and get in their head and la 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 la. And then, so that's one type of experience. Or then there's designing an experience that we are intentionally trying to create a feeling, a specific feeling. So we want people to walk in and to feel a sense of mystery and wonder. Great. We want people to walk in and feel a sense of, stark, desolate loneliness. Or we want to
Yeah.
design an experience, so we're designing for an emotional experience, or we're just designing for experience, which are kind
Yeah.
of, two.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think it's like, I remember Don Norman, he's a legendary sort of, designer as well. And he talks about this question of, do you design for the experience or for the memory of the experience?
Yeah.
And again, those are quite different things as well, right? Like, you have this immediate, experience all the time, but we actually forget most of that. We forget, like, I don't know what it is, 90% of our sort of actual experience. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Like, right, if you can remember that,
Yeah.
And we remember these emotional high moments, right? And so as an experience designer, I think that's also, the methodology that we use is very much around sort of looking at what is the end goal and then sort of backtracking, right? Like, how do we reach that end goal? What is the sort of core story we want people to tell? How do we get that narrative out, right? Like, and you have to think of it really actually quite short. Like, oh, it was this, there was a, there was this cloud, and then the cloud rained down our hopes on us, or whatever it is. Like, there's, you have to really think of like, how do you craft an experience that can easily be told as a story? I think that actually goes quite into our, like, how do you actually, as an experience designer, make something relevant for how we actually experience the world, in a way. But then I think there's also sort of like an X factor, which I really heard you speaking about before, of sort of like that surrendering as a facilitator. And I think that there's an element of the people leading experiences, if there's a deep authenticity, or like the place that the sort of holders of that experience are coming from, also impacts it very much. Like, you could name like the perfect, you could make sort of perfect like experience design, but if there's still a sort of lack of coherence, yeah, I just experienced that very strongly, that yeah, when
Yeah.
I'm able to really be coherent, it impacts the group in a way.
And I love even bouncing off you here that we are, a lot of the time as experience designers, we're employed to design an experience that we promise an outcome, or we will help someone say, hey, we think that you can reach the outcome that you're hoping to reach through an experience. But and I should say, and there's something else that happens when you really are in an experience and having an experience that transcends even your wildest outcome. And that's when it,
Mm,
that's when it becomes the things you're like, I know that IKEA told us to do great. And we tick that box and it's excellent. And they go, that was amazing, great. But then there was this other thing that emerged, this other feeling or this sense or this relationship or this conversation or that we could not in our wildest dreams have planned or hoped for. But that is another. I mean, I might be getting ahead of ourselves in a little Zoom call here. I'm curious though to ask
no,
you
for sure.
two of the same questions. Kate, we're going to miss you. Um, two of the same questions that was asked of me before, because I would love to hear your take. Firstly, Steph asked about like this danger element. So she's one of the things when she looked at some of the photos I shared, she went, part of me thought, isn't that great? This is awesome. And another part of her felt like, oh my God, it's terrifying. It's so uncomfortable to
Mm,
put people in a position where they have to step outside their comfort zone. And I would love to hear your take on this idea of designing to keep everyone safe versus, well, are we designing for that transformative, uncomfortable growth type of experience?
mm. Yeah, beautiful. I mean, and I think that's really at the core of aiming for transformation. And it's a very, fine line. And I think I've experienced the culture, at least in Europe, to become a little bit more, yeah, like reserved at least, or like there's a little bit less, or there's, you need to be a little bit more careful in
Mm,
the last several like years around, and specifically in terms of bringing people out of their comfort zone. And I think it's, you have to approach things with deep care, deep respect, and again, like that deep intention to create, positive, yeah, positive impact on people. Um, and so, yeah, I work really hard on like how to frame specifically the language around these moments, because if you get sort of, if you can really frame the language in a positive way that still enables people like a choice, it's super important that people have choice and they opt into these moments that, you can call them sort of like hot moments, or these moments that are emotionally challenging for people. And then it's really, I've been really interested in this idea, or the importance of building intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. That's incredibly important in these moments,
mm,
where it has to really come from the participant themselves. I mean, all experience comes, like, people make their own experience,
mm,
and really, but really, how do you give them more sort of agency in creating their own experience? And
mm,
so I was actually just working. I work with I have a Brazilian colleague, Lais Gluck. She's amazing. She has developed a model called the Waves model, which sort of is using discomfort as a fuel for transformation.
mm,
She was actually just here visiting me 2 days ago, and we made a small experience for a group of friends, and we were just like prototyping, and I think one thing that helped us was like breaking down, like, you have the experience that you design. Um, in this case, we wanted to design a sense of confusion. So we wanted people to sort of get a task that they couldn't complete. Um, and then there's a choice. Then there's like an emotional choice that the person has to make. So what you can do as the experience designer is design that sort of like experience element, but then you have to give space for the participant to make their emotional sort of choice and their sort of commitment to go forward with the experience, if it makes sense. And then, so it's like that, like, it's almost like this, like laddering, if it makes sense. Like, you can do
mm,
your part, then you have to wait for them to do their part. Then
mm.
you can do your part, and you have to wait for them to do their part. If that makes, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I'm like, I'm
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
articulating.
I mean, even on as Frank just keeps asking amazing questions. I want to ask get some of them. Even in a very rudimentary way of that, what you're just sharing then is I think about on a Zoom call or perhaps any room you're facilitating, and you say, "Does anyone have any questions or something they'd like to share?" And of course, there's that uncomfortable silence. And you can fill that silence, or you can let them say, hey, who wants to come on this journey, and rah, rah, rah. And you can frame up at the start of the day or continually across the day, hey, your participation, your generosity of sharing your story will make the conversation reach you, rah, 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 rah. But it's going to, it's creating a thing and then inviting that participation, whether they want to step into that with you. That's it. Like, I'm just talking absolute ground level type of.
Yeah. But it's a very clear example. Yeah.
Let's go, Frank. There's two that Frank's got, and we'll see if we can get to both of them because they're both rad.
Yeah, I'm hoping folks can stay a little bit because I know that we're at time.
Yes.
But if you can stay for a couple of these questions.
Stay. Hopefully Frank can stay because we're going to answer his questions. Can an experience not involve an artistic component? I'll jump in on that as I read that. And the first thing that comes to my mind is in Quechua, the Quechuan people in Peru, they have a saying where wisdom is encoded in beauty. So anything in the universe that we deem to be beautiful, that just takes our breath away, that we go, oh, it's just beautiful. You look a little deeper, there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of intelligence, there's a lot of consciousness in it. It's not just a couple of things thrown together. A flower, a sunset, this, rain falling on the blah, 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 blah. A conversation between two friends that haven't seen each other in years, and there's an intelligence, there's a wisdom in that beauty. And I almost feel like the same is true of an experience. When it's really an experience, it almost will inevitably feel artistic in some way. It doesn't have to be, but it's almost like conflating the arts. The arts is just experience, or it's our expression of experience in a way. It's our way of expressing how we've felt or when we've been in an experience. It's like, oh, I just have to get this out and write a song about it or paint something or rah, rah. So maybe it's less about the experience having to contain art, but more that, it's just like, it's our way of, I don't know. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It's kind of like, well, they're just natural buddies. Even if you don't make it, you don't try to make it artistic. It might just feel that way because. Does that make any sense? I just think it's such a beautiful question.
It seems to be that everything that you were talking about, you swap out the word experience and reinsert the word art, and that would fly. So my question really is are we really actually just talking about making performance and art, and is experience just a kind of rebranding of the word so that we can kind of, we can basically,
charge more,
charge more or work, or kind of sanitize the language so that we can get into the corporate space. So it's kind of like, so are we sort of letting the language of our performance and cultural participation be sort of, colonized by the kind of corporate so that we can actually talk to them so that we can then possibly colonize them, or do we get colonized in the process? Like, I don't know. It's the question, so, are we just, so where does experience, where's an experience start and where does an art event start? What's the difference?
Wow. Spot on. Yeah, I know, but I'm aware of the time, but I mean, I think it's such a beautiful question. For my exploration of the experience design, sort of the writing, the academic work on experience design, there's a lot of stuff from the corporate space on customer experience. Now there's all this stuff on employee experience, but generally I find there's sort of reflections on what the human experience is quite bland and quite sort of, and some of the best writing I've found about the human experience comes from art historians, actually, and from the art world. So for example, he's not just an art historian, he's also like a learning philosopher, but John Dewey, for example, he's written this book called Art as Experience, right? And I think that's like, has some best, actual description of what it means to make an experience, what the human experience is. And I think it's actually very informative for us in terms of designing better customer experiences or employee experiences. I'm not so interested in sort of like, boxing them as art or corporate, or, I think that it's more of like, does it come into that space of really touching someone, really moving someone? And yeah, let's go there. Yeah.
With that, then, while we've got it and we're going, I want to go back to this other one. Where's the line between the craft and charisma, and how does that translate to a method? I'd love to hear your take on that, Andy. Are there ways for anyone to take on a methodology or to apply a set of principles, universal principles, or is it like, well, no, sorry, you'll never be good at this because you don't have a gregarious, outgoing personality, rah 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 rah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, absolutely, it's possible. I mean, one of the things that we talk about is, structure is your co-facilitator. So really, building in structure into the design of an experience. And we also talked about, you had a beautiful reflection about this. Just I joined the call. We say like to be over-structured and under-prepared. So you really build out that structure using, clear methodology, but then meeting people where they are, like being being ready to adapt and dance in the moment. But I would also say that, there's different roles in the design of an experience, and people are good at different aspects of it. Some, and it's really important to, find what's natural for you as an experience designer. Yeah. How about you, Miko? How would you answer that?
I like that's a beautiful answer. Yeah, particularly, and I agree. My background's in jazz. I have a feeling, Frank, your background's in the arts as well, or something to do with that. But jazz is so much theory, and yet so much throwing it out and just being free and trusted. But you have to have the technical dexterity of your instrument and what you're playing. There's a lot of hours spent in the design, in understanding music and all of that, and yet at the same time, it's there's an absolute surrender. See you, Sam, in the moment, that allows for this free exchange of ideas, that allows for an experience to be created. So having, I love that over planning and under preparing.
Yeah,
and exactly. Then I also really love that last point you made too, that everyone's got their unique flavor to bring, and some people are going to be great on a stage holding the space, and other people and are hopeless at these small little details that make all the difference. Oh shit, where did I put the bloody name tags? Whereas someone else is like, mate, don't worry, I've already laid them out, and I've added something else, and I've done something else, but don't you let me near that stage because I don't want to hold a microphone ever. And that beautiful partnership, it makes the experience richer for everyone. So that's, gorgeous.
And then, do you mind if I jump in again? Sorry,
please.
But if someone else wants to talk, please, that came out of a conversation with Kate, who I think has jumped off the call, and she was talking about designing experiences, and how she was working this idea that you never insert yourself into the experience. And I was like, well, that's kind of the opposite of what what you'd been talking about, Michael, kind of in terms of like your work was so based on your capabilities, your skill base, and so your craft is based around your art. And so how do you, so the question was really trying to dance around that idea of like, well, if you're going to make experiences, where does the person making the experience, come into it? Like, where's their kind of signature, authentic kind of, way of doing it, whether it's big or small, kind of in front or in the back, but as opposed to where is the kind of audiences where it's all about the audience, as opposed to, and so interesting kind of, because I think you can never not be part of that conversation if you're leading it or you're kind of framing it. And so kind of just recognizing that and being honest about it is kind of, I think, really important.
We talked about this before, Andrew, remember?
Yes, exactly.
I just remembered I never sent you anything. I used to talk years ago about this artisan thinking. There was design thinking, and what never landed for me was like, but there's no such thing as objectivity. Like the person, the maker has just as much influence over what is being made for, a customer, consumer. They're in there, and we're seeing that with AI. That like AI's completely been subjectively coded, and we're seeing that with how racist it is and sexist and all of that. Like we're in it whether we like it or not. So I'm with you on that, Frank. And Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts again on that.
Yeah, for sure. you know, the dominant methodology that's been used largely by the corporate world to really bring design and a design approach into the world is, you know, this human-centered design. And it's wonderful. I mean, I remember learning human-centered design for the first time, and I mean, there is really, you know, value in that, where you really, it's very focused, strongly focused on listening, on empathy. And yet what it lacks is exactly, you know, what Mick was talking about there, you know, that there's sort of like this authenticity when, Frank, you design an experience that is, you know, bringing in, if you're a jazz musician, you're jazz, or if you're a, you know, or if you're a painter, you're painting. Like if there's so, you know, what I would advocate for is that both, you know, both and approach, that you really do still bring in that human-centered, empathetic, empathy-driven design approach, where you're really deeply listening to the needs and adapting your experience to where people are that you're designing for, and also bring in your own authenticity. Yeah. But it's really, really, I'll just share, I wrote an article with an artist a couple of years ago on this sort of topic, so I'll just share that.
It's amazing.
A friend of mine does this beautiful work called citational practices to start her sessions, where she gets people to reflect on to reflect on all the people that have influenced them. And so it can be anything from you know, like theorists to artists, to their parents, to friends, to the sunset. And so but people start, so you're reflecting on you cite sort of quite, you can either write it down and share it, but it's a beautiful practice. It brings people into the room in a really kind of, in a kind of, not only themselves, but in a kind of, you know, the full reflecting on where they've come, how they've come to be, into, you know, all the kind of influences. It's a really lovely kind of, it's a really lovely form that she's developing.
You know, I know people probably have to leave, but you know what, this conversation is too awesome, so I'm just going to keep going. We talked about this a bit this morning. I mean, a small group of people, when we do this, Indigenous wisdom kind of stuff, very out there, very awesome, very amazing. And we talked about just yesterday this lack of continuity, I should say, with people attributing to what's made them and who has made them. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Indigenous cultures, First Nations cultures, they're always telling the old stories. They're always singing the old songs. They're keeping present. I'm only here because of them and this and that, and and there's an aliveness and a richness there. And nowadays, I mean, we're at peak, not honoring and celebrating and acknowledging where we've, you know, come from and how we've come to be. And you see that as people ripping off quotes that they've ripped off quotes that they've ripped off quotes and quotes and putting them up on Instagram. It's like, man, that is so actually out of context of the original. That was a T.S. Eliot thing, and now you're putting it as some parenting technique. Who knows what? It's hilarious, but it's like this. We're not getting the value of knowing where things have come from at their source. So we're just getting these shallow, short things. So we're kind of all just lost, and nothing's taking root in us, because we're not knowing where it had come from. You know, I thought that's really powerful. So it's such a great activity to do at the start of something, to get people to go, hey, you're only here because of all those people that have inspired and informed you. Let's bring them in the room. It's gorgeous. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
With you, Bex. Yeah, great comment from Bex. Honestly, I love this. I love everyone on this call that we're having this kind of conversation. I want to have them all day, every day. It's just brilliant. Can you hear my dog?
And just want to open up to any final questions from folks. Do you have a question for either of our presenters, or a question about the Experience Design program? And I'll just drop in the link as well for the program. So take a look, and we still do have a few more spots left. if you're interested, it will be again December 6th to the 9th at the Peppers Mineral Spa and Hotel in Hepburn Springs. So please do take a look and see if it's something that you might be interested in, because I think it is an opportunity to go much deeper into a lot of these questions and really be able to also apply it directly to the work that you're doing. So the idea here is that we really do want to work on experiences, projects, programs that you're currently designing for, and to bring that into the space. Anything else, Andy, before we close?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation, reflections, prompts. So yeah, I really look forward to discuss more.